I fell asleep to the rattle of quarters in a diner apron and woke to the screech of a tow truck hooking my car. A knuckle rapped the glass. A face I knew from framed portraits leaned in. "Kiddo," my grandfather said, voice steady. "Why are you sleeping in a parking lot?" Because the family trust for my education vanished, and the people who brag about our last name made sure I never asked why. My name is Nora Vale. In the pre-dawn chill of Grey Ridge, the world shrinks to the dimensions of a 1998 Pontiac Grand Am. Steam from my own breathing fogs the inside of the glass, a soft, temporary curtain against the sodium lights of the 24-hour grocery store parking lot that has become my bedroom, my dining room, and my study hall. I am 24 years old, and my life is measured in the scent of stale coffee from a thermos wedged in the console, and the lingering aroma of fryer grease clinging to my diner uniform, which is currently wadded into a pillow. The cold seeps through the car's thin metal floor, a persistent, gnawing thing that settles deep in your bones. It's a specific kind of cold, the kind that feels like failure. Sleep isn't a gentle drift, it's a fall from a cliff, a brief, dreamless plunge into oblivion between the end of my shift at the Starlight Diner and the beginning of my shift shelving books at the campus library. I'm supposed to be up in an hour. My phone alarm is set. A shrill, digital scream that I've come to dread more than the cold itself. But it's not the alarm that wakes me. It's a high-pitched, metallic screech, followed by the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a heavy-duty winch. My eyes snap open. The world outside is a nightmare of flashing amber lights, strobing across the fogged-up windows, turning my cramped sanctuary into a cage. A silhouette, bulky and broad-shouldered, moves past my windshield. The tow truck, my heart, which had been a slow, tired drum, hammers against my ribs with a frantic, desperate rhythm. They're taking my car. They're taking my home. I lurch forward, my hands smacking the dashboard. The uniform pillow tumbles to the floor. My breath catches in my throat. A dry, painful knot of panic, the sign I'd ignored for the past week. The one nailed to a light post. Patrons only. 2-hour limit. Violators towed at owner's expense. Flashes in my mind. I'd been playing a dangerous game, moving the Pontiac from one corner of the vast lot to another every few days, hoping to become part of the scenery. The game was over. I'd lost. My fingers scramble for the ignition, a stupid, reflexive instinct, as if starting the engine would somehow make the steel hook latched onto my rear axle disappear. As I'm about to turn the key, a sharp rap on the driver's side window makes me jump so violently I hit my head on the roof. It's not the tow truck driver. Through the circle, I wipe in the condensation. A face materializes. It's a face I know intimately, but only from a distance. From heavy, silver-framed portraits on polished mahogany tables, from glossy pages in business magazines, from the head of the table at the handful of holiday dinners I'd been required to attend before the freeze-out, wrinkles etched like a roadmap around eyes that are a pale, piercing blue, a jaw set with the kind of stubbornness that builds empires. He's wearing a dark wool overcoat that probably costs more than my entire tuition, and in one hand, he holds a simple wooden cane with a silver head. Arthur Vale, my grandfather. He raps on the glass again, a little harder this time, an impatient, commanding sound. My mind goes blank. The tow truck, the cold, the exhaustion, it all vanishes, replaced by a roaring white noise of pure, undiluted shock. I fumble with the lock, my numb fingers clumsy on the plastic switch. The door clicks open. The cold air rushes in, smelling of asphalt and impending rain. He doesn't speak. He just stands there, his gaze sweeping over the interior of my car with a slow, methodical appraisal that feels more invasive than any physical search. His eyes move from the crumpled fast food bags on the passenger floor to the stack of textbooks, advanced macroeconomics, corporate law, ethical auditing, piled precariously on the back seat. He sees the plastic crate holding my folded clothes, the single towel, the toothbrush and a cup holder. His gaze lingers for a beat on my work shoes, the ones with the soles worn so thin I can feel the grit of the pavement through them. Finally, his eyes meet mine. They are not angry, they are not sad. They are empty, a flat, analytical void. "How long have you been living in here, Nora?" he asks. His voice is exactly as I remember it. A low, steady baritone, smooth as aged whiskey, the kind of voice that commands boardrooms and terminates million-dollar deals without a single tremor. The question hangs in the frigid air between us. Shame, hot and acidic, rises in my throat. I want to lie. I want to invent a story about a broken-down car, a friend's house I was just leaving. But the evidence of my life is packed around me like a tomb, and looking into that unreadable face, I know a lie would be a wasted effort. He deals in facts, in ledgers, in bottom lines. I swallow, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The tow truck driver has stopped the winch, watching us with undisguised curiosity. 3 weeks, I say, my voice a hoarse croak. I clear my throat and try again, forcing a semblance of strength into my words. I work the night shift at the diner, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Then I have an early shift at the campus library, 7 to 11. It was cheaper than rent. I don't say it as an excuse. I say it as a mathematical certainty, a simple, brutal equation. Arthur Vale remains silent. The only sound is the low grumble of the tow truck's engine. He gives the driver a curt, almost imperceptible shake of his head. The man nods once, retreats to his cab, and with a hydraulic hiss, the hook disengages from my car. The flashing lights go dark. My execution has been stayed. My grandfather's attention returns to me. He reaches inside his tailored coat and pulls out a long leather wallet. He flips it open, his thumb moving toward a thick fold of cash. The motion is so casual, so automatic. It's the Vale solution to everything. A problem appears. You throw money at it until it goes away. And in that moment, something inside me, something that has been dormant and frozen for months, cracks. The shame evaporates, replaced by a sudden, glacial rage. He thinks this is about a few $100s. He thinks he can buy his way out of this inconvenient, messy reality, wipe his conscience clean, and drive away in his heated German sedan, leaving me in this parking lot with my greasy uniform and my crushing debt. No, I say. The word is quiet, but it's as hard as a diamond. He pauses, his thumb resting on the edge of a $100 bill. I don't need spare change, I tell him, my voice gaining a new, unfamiliar resonance. It feels like someone else is speaking, someone who isn't cold or tired or scared. I need the truth. For the first time, an emotion flickers in his pale blue eyes. Surprise. It's gone in an instant. But I saw it. The mask slipped. He slowly, deliberately, closes the wallet and returns it to his coat. He looks at me for another long moment, and it feels different now. He's not just looking at his granddaughter sleeping in a car. He's looking at an unknown variable that has just appeared in one of his equations. Get your keys, he says. It's not a request. Follow me. He turns without another word and walks toward a sleek black Audi parked discreetly a few rows over. He doesn't look back to see if I'm obeying. He knows I will. I sit there for a second, my heart still beating a strange, new rhythm. I turn the key in the ignition. The Pontiac's old engine coughs and sputters before groaning to life. As I pull out of the parking space, I glance at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair is a mess. There are dark circles under my eyes, and a single, dried black streak of yesterday's mascara traces a path down my cheek like a tear I don't remember crying. But my eyes are clear. The desperation that has been my constant companion for 3 years is gone. In its place is a cold, hard resolve, just beginning to take shape. I follow the silent, perfect glide of his Audi through the empty streets of Grey Ridge. We're not heading toward the grand, gated estate where he lives. We're heading downtown, toward the glass and steel tower that pierces the gray morning sky, Vale Harbor Capital. I thought he had found me to offer a lifeline. a bit of pity wrapped in crisp currency. I was wrong. He wasn't taking me to a shelter. He was taking me to the source of the rot, to the place where the lock was forged. And he was about to show me where they kept the key. The Northbridge building is a monument to our family's success, a sheer cliff of dark glass and brushed steel that reflects the flat, gray Ridge sky. My Pontiac coughs in its shadow, a rusted, dented piece of history parked illegally in the executive drop-off lane. Arthur doesn't seem to notice the security guard's nervous glance. He just hands his keys to a valet who materializes from the revolving doors, his face a perfect mask of professional deference. I leave my own car unlocked. There is, quite literally, nothing left in it to steal. I follow my grandfather across a lobby so vast and silent, it feels like a cathedral built to honor capital. The floor is acres of white marble, veins of gray spiderwebbing beneath a polish so deep it looks wet. The air smells of nothing, a sterile, expensive absence of scent. My own clothes, I realize, still carry the faint, greasy perfume of the Starlight Diner. I instinctively pull my thin jacket tighter, a small, useless gesture of concealment. The Vale family. From the outside, we are the American dream rendered in gilt. Our name is carved into the stone lintels of libraries and hospital wings. We are a dynasty built on 2 centuries of shrewd, relentless investment. The public face of Vale Harbor Capital is one of stability, community, and unimpeachable integrity. They see the quarterly charity galas, an event Marla orchestrates with military precision. I've seen the seating charts, the calculated placement of politicians next to tech billionaires, all of it designed for the perfect photograph, the one that ends up in the society pages of the local paper. Arthur Vale, flanked by his devoted daughter-in-law, Marla, and nephew Devon, pledges another 7 figures to the Children's Literacy Fund. The photograph always features the same smiles, wide, bright, and utterly lifeless. They are the smiles of people who know their picture is being taken. That is the Vale family I was born into, the one I was supposed to be a part of. The reality is a different ledger entirely. The moment we are inside the private elevator, a wood-paneled box with its own soft, indirect lighting, the silence stretches. My grandfather inserts a heavy, old-fashioned key into a discreet lock, and the panel for the 40th floor, the executive level, lights up. He hasn't reduced his load. He's been quarantined. For the past 5 years, the operational reins of Vale Harbor Capital have been held by my step-aunt Marla and my cousin. Devon, Marla, my father's widow, is a woman of sharp angles and smoother surfaces. Her hair is a severe blonde helmet. Her suits are impeccably tailored, and her smile never, ever reaches her eyes. She is all strategy. Devon is the muscle, or rather, the bluster. He's the backslapping, overly familiar face of the company's new media ventures, a man who uses corporate buzzwords like synergy and disruption to mask a profound, almost impressive incompetence. Together, they are the regents, the ones guiding the company into the 21st century, while Arthur, the king, was gently and firmly nudged into a ceremonial role. The elevator doors slide open with a soundless hiss, revealing a reception area that looks more like a modern art gallery than an office. My grandfather walks past the startled receptionist without a word. I follow, my worn-out shoes making no sound on the plush gray carpet. We pass the boardroom, its glass walls currently opaque, and head toward the older wing of the floor, the part that still has solid wood doors and brass nameplates. This place, this company, was supposed to be my future. It was a given. An assumption as solid as the marble in the lobby. The Nora Vale Educational Trust was established the day I was born. It was not a gift. It was an asset, part of the architecture of my life. Then, the summer I turned 21, just as I was transferring from community college to the university's prestigious business program, the architecture collapsed. I received a letter, not from a lawyer, but from Marla's personal assistant. It was brief, printed on heavy cream-colored cardstock. The trust, it explained, was being temporarily deferred as part of a strategic asset reallocation. I remember the chill of that paper. I called Marla immediately. She took the call, her voice warm and full of that practiced, sympathetic concern. "Nora, honey, you're an adult now," she'd said, a soft, patronizing chime in her voice. I could picture her at her desk, one manicured finger tapping on her mouse pad. "Your grandfather and Devin, we all feel it's so important that the new generation learns to be strong, to be independent. It builds character. We can't just hand everything to you. What would that teach you?" I'd tried to argue. I mentioned the trust charter, the promises made. She'd cut me off with a gentle, pitying laugh. "Oh, Nora, you're not a child. Don't talk about promises. We're talking about sound financial planning. This is for your own good. You'll thank us one day." I hung up, my hands shaking. The ground had vanished from beneath my feet. A week later, the second blow landed, a letter from the university's scholarship committee, the one I had counted on to cover the gap. My application had been denied. The language was cold. Standard issue regret. A highly competitive pool of applicants. We are unable to offer you a place. That was the one that broke me. Marla's corporate maneuvering was one thing. I could dismiss that as greed. But the scholarship, that was my failure. I wasn't good enough. My grades, my essays, my entire academic self, weighed and found wanting. The character Marla wanted me to build felt, at that moment, like pure, unadulterated shame. So I did what she wanted. I became independent. I took out student loans at a crippling interest rate. I got a job at the library. When that wasn't enough to cover tuition and the tiny, mold-infested apartment I shared, I got the second job at the diner, working the graveyard shift until my hands smelled permanently of bleach and potatoes. I learned to live on 4 hours of sleep, fueled by caffeine and a quiet, simmering bitterness. The bitterness turned to a cold, precise anger 3 months ago. It was 4 a.m., and I was in the campus computer lab, supposedly finishing a paper on derivatives. Instead, I was staring at my student email account. On a whim, a sleepless, desperate impulse, I'd been digging through the system's backend, through server logs and deleted folders. I was looking for anything, a missed deadline, a lost form, some explanation for my failure. And I found it. Buried in a deleted drafts folder that should have been empty was a single, unsent email. It was from my own account, dated the same day my scholarship application had been due. It was a draft, not a sent message, but it was addressed to the scholarship committee's head, and the subject line was, "Withdrawal of application, Nora Vale." The body of the email was simple, polite, and stated I had secured alternative funding and wished to withdraw my name from consideration. I had never written it. I had never seen it. But someone with access to my student portal had. Attached to the draft, like a receipt for the crime, was a copy of the real letter from the committee, which had been redirected to this draft folder instead of my inbox. It wasn't a rejection. It was a full-ride acceptance. "Congratulations. Impressed by your academic record, the Vale Family Legacy Scholarship." A scholarship funded by my own family's endowment. A scholarship Marla and Devin sat on the board of. A scholarship I never knew I'd won. Blocked by a single, digital sleight of hand. They hadn't just taken my trust fund. They had systematically, surgically, removed my safety net, ensuring I would fail, ensuring I would believe I was inadequate. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted me broken. That was the night I stopped being a victim and started being a collector. I gave up the apartment I couldn't afford. I moved into the Pontiac. I saved every penny. I stopped sleeping and started watching. Working nights does something to your brain. You become nocturnal, invisible. You notice the patterns of the world that daytime people miss. You see which doors are left propped open, when the security guards change shifts, and where the blind spots are. My route to the diner took me past the Northbridge building every night, and every night, I would practice. I started counting the security cameras on the building's exterior. There are 14 covering the ground floor perimeter, 4 over the loading bay, 2 pointing at the executive garage entrance. It became a habit, a catechism. I'd count them like a person counting rosary beads, a ritual to focus the cold rage that was now my only fuel. My grandfather stops in front of a heavy oak door marked Archives. He looks at me, his face still unreadable in the dim, expensive light of the hallway. "You said you wanted the truth," he says. I nod, my throat tight. "The truth is a liability, Nora," he says, his hand resting on the brass doorknob. "It doesn't pay dividends. It doesn't show up on a quarterly report. It just is." He turns the knob and pushes the door open, revealing a room dark and quiet, smelling of old paper and dust. I stare into the darkness, my heart a slow, steady drum. I am no longer the girl in the car. I am not the failed student. I am the sum of their lies, and I am here to collect. This morning, I am done counting cameras. It's time to start counting the evidence. The archives room is a world away from the rest of the 40th floor. The air here is cool and still, thick with the dry, slightly sweet scent of aging paper and leather bindings. There are no windows. Rows of tall, rolling metal shelves are packed tight with document boxes and thick binders, each labeled with a neat, typed tag. It's the analog heart of the digital empire, a library of deals made and promises broken. My grandfather doesn't turn on the overhead fluorescent lights. Instead, he flicks a switch by the door that illuminates a single green-shaded lamp on a heavy wooden table in the center of the room, casting long, deep shadows. He walks directly to a section of the far wall that looks, to me, like a seamless expanse of wood paneling. He presses a point near the floor with the tip of his cane, and a section clicks open, revealing a bank of matte gray safe deposit boxes, each with a combination dial and a keyhole. He stops at the one marked with a small brass plate, A17. His fingers, though wrinkled, are steady as he spins the dial with a series of precise metallic clicks. He produces a key from his waistcoat pocket, inserts it, and turns. The heavy door swings open with a soft, expensive sigh of compressed air. From inside, he withdraws not a stack of bearer bonds or a collection of jewels, but a single, thick manila envelope, sealed with a brittle wax stamp bearing the Vale family crest. A fine layer of dust coats its surface, suggesting it hasn't been disturbed in years. He holds it for a moment, weighing it in his hand, then turns and places it on the table under the lamplight. "My mother, your great-grandmother, had this prepared," he says, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. He looks at me, his eyes holding a gravity I've never seen before. "She told me to give it to you on the day you came asking for answers instead of money." My throat is too dry to speak. The day he found me in the parking lot, the moment I refused his wallet, that was the key. Not my suffering, but my rejection of the easy solution, my demand for the truth. My fingers tremble slightly as I reach for the envelope. The wax seal cracks under my touch, crumbling into dusty red flakes on the polished wood. I slide the contents out. The first is a letter, several pages long, written in an elegant, looping cursive on heavy, yellowed stationery, my great-grandmother's handwriting. The second is a thick-bound document, its cover embossed with the words, "Articles of Incorporation and Corporate Bylaws, Vale Harbor Capital, Est, 1923. It's a certified copy, heavy and official, and the last item is an anomaly, a piece of the modern world tucked into this time capsule. It's a plastic keycard, pristine white, with a magnetic stripe on the back. A single line of black text is printed below the corporate logo, Nora Vale. I look up at my grandfather, a question in my eyes. He simply nods toward the bound charter. Page 47, Appendix B. I open the heavy document. The pages are crisp, the type old-fashioned. I flip through sections detailing shareholder rights, board composition, and dividend policies until I find Appendix B. The heading reads, Contingency Clause for Executive Incapacitation, the Golden Proxy Mandate. The language is dense, archaic legalese, but the meaning is brutally clear. It's a relic from a more cutthroat era, a corporate fail-safe designed by the company's founders. It stipulates that in the event the acting chairman of the board is deemed temporarily incapacitated by a licensed physician, unable to perform their duties due to health, duress, or other external constraints, their full and indivisible voting power does not pass to the vice chair or the board. Instead, it is immediately and automatically transferred to a pre-designated heir, a single individual named in a sealed and notarized addendum. This golden proxy holds the chairman's complete authority for a period of 90 days, with the power to hire, fire, audit, and overrule the board. It was a poison pill, designed to prevent a hostile takeover from within if the patriarch was ever weakened. A king's temporary replacement, chosen not by his court, but by his own hand long before the battle began. My eyes scan the bottom of the clause. It refers to Addendum B1, to be updated at the chairman's discretion. Tucked into the sleeve of the binder is another, newer document. It's a single page, notarized and stamped. It designates the sole recipient of the golden proxy. My name is typed in the blank space. It's dated 2 years ago, 6 months after Marla and Devon engineered the deferment of my trust. It is signed, in his unmistakable forceful script, by Arthur Vale. He knew, or at least, he suspected, 2 years ago, he forged the weapon and put my name on it, waiting for me to be ready to wield it. I look at the keycard in my hand. It suddenly feels immensely heavy. "What is this for?" I ask, my voice barely a whisper. "That," he says, pointing a finger toward another section of the wood-paneled wall, "is for the second set of books." He presses another hidden switch. A panel slides back, revealing not a safe, but a steel door with a single electronic card reader glowing with a small green light. Our main servers can be altered, logs can be wiped, emails deleted, but that room is the company's memory. It's a fully independent, redundant server. Everything is written to it in real time. Nothing is ever erased. It was designed for catastrophic data loss. As it turns out, it's also useful for catastrophic integrity loss. He takes a step closer, and for the first time, his voice drops to a near whisper, a conspiratorial tone that makes the fine hairs on my arms stand up. "I have my suspicions. Nora, I see the quarterly reports that are too clean. I hear the whispers from the old guard, the ones loyal to me who Marla and Devon are systematically pushing out. But suspicion is not proof. An old man's accusations against his family would be dismissed as senility, a power grab. It would tear the company apart, publicly." He meets my gaze, his eyes intense. "The truth, if it was to have any power, had to be found and brought forth by you. You are the one they wronged. You are the one they underestimated." And there it is, the entire, chilling picture. This was never a rescue mission. He didn't save me from the tow truck out of grandfatherly concern. He intervened because the final piece of his long, silent chess game had just moved into position. He let me struggle, let me sleep in my car, let me work myself to the bone, all to see if I had the spine for this. He was testing me, forging me in the same fire of hardship that he and his mother and his father had endured. He needed to know if I was just another spoiled Vale heir, or if I was, like him, a survivor. He turns to leave. He pauses at the door, his hand on the knob. He doesn't look back. "The lock on your car door is broken," he says, a complete non sequitur. "You should get that fixed." Then he steps out, closing the heavy oak door behind him, leaving me alone in the cone of light in the center of the dark room. The silence he leaves behind is absolute. For a long moment, I can only hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. I feel a tremor start in my hands, a wave of adrenaline and terror, and a strange, savage elation. I am an instrument of a plot I never knew existed. I am a key to a lock I never knew was closed. The weight of it is immense. I could walk out of this room, throw the keycard in the river, and disappear. But I don't. I close my eyes. I take one deep, slow breath, then another. I picture Marla's condescending smile. I hear Devon's booming, empty laugh. I feel the phantom chill of sleeping in my car. The trembling in my hands stops. My breathing evens out, becoming slow and deliberate. The fear is still there, but it's no longer in control. It has been transformed into fuel, cold and clear and highly combustible. I walk to the steel door and hold the white card up to the reader. The green light flickers, and then the lock gives a loud, decisive clunk. I push the door open. The room inside is frigid, a small, windowless space dominated by a single, humming black server rack. The only sound is the whir of the cooling fans, a steady, hypnotic drone. A monitor and keyboard sit on a small, built-in desk. I sit down, the chair cold against my legs. I insert the keycard into a slot on the terminal. A login screen appears, then vanishes, replaced by a simple, text-based directory, root access. My fingers fly over the keyboard. Muscle memory from 1,000 hours spent in computer labs. I know what I'm looking for. I navigate to the financial transaction logs, specifically to the subledgers for internal trusts. I pull up the records for the Nora Vale Educational Trust. I filter for all outgoing transfers within the last 3 years. A list populates the screen. Dozens of small, administrative fees, insurance payments, the things I would expect, and then a series of 5 large, round-numbered transfers, starting exactly 1 week after my trust was deferred. The recipient for each is the same: a holding company I've never heard of, a shell corporation, registered out of state. I run a quick cross-reference on its corporate officers. And there it is, the first piece of hard, immutable proof. The money from my education fund, laundered through a series of accounts, ending up in a company called Harbor Social LLC, president and sole signatory, Marla Vale. I did not return to the parking lot. My grandfather's intervention was not charity, it was an activation. The Audi had deposited me at a short-term corporate apartment 2 blocks from the Northbridge building, a sterile beige box of a room that was infinitely safer than my car. My Pontiac was, as he'd noted, in the shop, for a broken lock, a euphemism for a full tune-up and new tires, all billed to a vague corporate facilities account. I was given a key, a new burner phone, and one instruction. The summer internship program is accepting late entries. The next day, I was no longer Nora Vale, the dispossessed. I was Nora Vale, the humble, eager-to-learn intern in the operations department. I had applied through the internal portal, using a login my great-grandmother's keycard had given me, for the least glamorous, most overlooked position in the entire company. Operations was the plumbing, it was the mailroom, the shipping manifests, the invoice processing, the digital sanitation. It was a gray ocean of cubicles in the building's basement, far from the 40th floor views. Devin himself processed my application. I could almost hear his sneering laugh when he saw it. He probably showed Marla. Look at her, crawling back. He saw it as the ultimate capitulation, the poor relation finally coming to beg for scraps at the table. He signed the approval instantly. My first day. He came down to the basement, a whirlwind of expensive cologne and feigned bonhomie. He clapped me on the shoulder, his touch making my skin crawl. "Nora, good to have you on the team. Really good. We love this kind of initiative." He gestured to a supervisor, a tired-looking woman who didn't make eye contact. "She'll get you set up. We're digitizing." He assigned me my task, the corporate equivalent of being sent to scrub the floors with a toothbrush. "We're reconciling the last 5 years of vendor invoices and shipping manifests," he said, waving a hand at a literal mountain of document boxes. "Just need to scan 'em, tag 'em, and file 'em in the new system. Mind-numbing stuff, I know. But hey, it's a foot in the door, right?" He gave me a wink, convinced he had buried me in a paper tomb, certain I would quit from sheer, soul-crushing boredom within a week. He profoundly misunderstood what it means to be a person who has worked 2 jobs and lived in a car. Boredom is a luxury. I craved monotony. I craved the data. He hadn't given me a punishment. He'd given me the keys to the entire supply chain. For 3 weeks, I was a machine. I scanned, I tagged, I filed, I ate lunch at my desk. I memorized vendor codes, shipping routes, and payment schedules. I was the perfect, invisible intern. And on the fourth week, I found the first loose thread. An invoice from a company called Executive Horizons Leadership. The charge, $15,000. The description, C-Suite Strategic Alignment Seminar, dated 3 months prior. The amount seemed high for a seminar. The date rang a distant bell. I minimized the scanning software and opened a private browser tab. Using a burner social media account, I navigated to Marla's public Instagram. I scrolled back 3 months. There it was, a photo of her, clinking champagne glasses with 2 other women by an infinity pool. The caption, a much-needed restorative weekend with the girls. Wellness work, hard, play hard. The geotag, the Serenity Ridge Spa, a famously exclusive, 5-star resort in the Hamptons. I opened another tab, the Serenity Ridge Spa's website. I navigated to their corporate packages. There, on page 3, was the Executive Wellness Restoration Package for 3 people for a weekend. The price, $14.95. Close enough. They'd just padded the invoice by $5. They were billing their spa days to the company as leadership training. It was a start, but it was petty. I needed the architecture, not the loose bricks. I moved from the paper in the basement to the digital realm. The redundant server in the archive room became my second home. My keycard let me in after hours. When the building was silent save for the hum of the cleaning crews, I began correlating the data from the invoices with the executive floor's digital footprint. Marla and Devin were smart, but they were also arrogant. They didn't conduct their most sensitive business in the main boardroom, which was surely bugged by their own internal security. Instead, their assistants booked a rotating series of meeting rooms on the 12th, 14th, and 20th floors. The calendar entries were always coded. Rook, Bishop, Queen, a private juvenile chess game played on company time. They thought this was a perfect smokescreen, but they forgot about the building's digital skeleton. From the A17 server, I pulled the keycard access logs for the 12th floor, filtering for the dates of the Rook meetings. 2:15 p.m. Tuesday. Keycard access granted to Marla Vale, Devin Vale, and K. Rinaldi. I ran Rinaldi's name. He was the senior partner at the accounting firm that audited Vale Harbor. I then pulled the hallway camera footage for that date and time, the backup server. As my grandfather had promised, never deleted anything. I watched the 3 of them walk into the Rook room. I watched them emerge an hour later. Rinaldi wiping his face, Marla's expression like granite. I had them. Rook was for the auditors. I cross-referenced the rest. Bishop was for their private wealth management lawyers. Queen was for a representative from an obscure offshore bank. Their secret chess game was now my map. I applied the same logic to Devin's expense reports. He was famously profligate, but his official accounts were clean. His departmental accounts, however, were a sewer. Tens of thousands of dollars coded to community outreach and civic impact development. The vendor was almost always the same. Raven Oaks Catering. Raven Oaks wasn't in the primary vendor database. A public records search showed it was an LLC registered to a PEO box in Delaware. But the invoices I'd scanned had delivery addresses. They weren't for homeless shelters or community centers. They were for Marla's private villa. I cross-referenced the dates with her Instagram. Community outreach for $25,000 on June 10th. Marla's Instagram. June 10th. So proud to host the annual Vale Summer Party. I pulled the liquor purchase orders from the same vendor, signed by Devin's assistant. Cases of Domaine de la Romanée Conti. Pallets of crystal champagne, all paid for by the civic impact budget. I had the money, I had the locations. Now I needed the voices. The 40th floor copy room was the floor's true center of power. It was the unofficial confessional, the place where tense whispers were exchanged over the rhythmic whir of the industrial-grade Konica. I read the employee handbook cover to cover. Page 54, Section 8. All company assets and property, including but not limited to electronic equipment, are subject to monitoring, search, and surveillance at any time. There is no expectation of privacy in the use of company equipment or on company premises. It was a blank check, signed by Marla herself. That evening, I fixed a malfunctioning power strip under the main workstation. The replacement I installed, purchased with cash from a spy shop 2 towns over, was a high-fidelity, voice-activated microphone that transmitted audio over a secure, encrypted signal to a small receiver I kept in my corporate apartment. It was perfectly, beautifully legal according to their own rules. For 2 days, I listened to nothing but the sound of scanning, collating, and banal complaints about the coffee. Then, late on a Wednesday night, I got it. They thought they were alone. Their voices were low, tight with frustration. Devon. The auditors are sniffing around Harbor Social again. They're asking about that initial transfer from the education fund. Marla's voice, sharp as a shard of glass. They're asking because Arthur is poking them. It doesn't matter. Reclassify the transfer as an unrealized consulting fee. Just move that last part of Nora's fund into the general account, the same way we did the others. It'll be invisible by morning. She'll never know. She's too busy playing with shipping labels in the basement to ever figure it out. Nora will never know. I saved the file, labeling it Exhibit A. My heart wasn't pounding. It was slow, cold, and steady. The final piece came from an unexpected ally. I wasn't the only ghost in the building. Miguel, one of the night security guards, would often pass my cubicle at 3 a.m. and find me under the green glow of the monitor. I shared my diner-bought coffee with him. He was a quiet man, close to retirement. He saw me, really saw me. "You work like someone who's already lost everything," he'd said once, not unkindly. 2 nights after I planted the bug, he walked past and, without stopping or looking at me, let a folded piece of paper drift onto my desk. I waited until he was gone to open it. 5 words, written in pencil. "Ite, pulling 12th floor camera, 10 p.m. Tonight, the 12th floor." Rook, Bishop, Queen. They weren't just covering their tracks. They were erasing the map. They were going to wipe the main server's footage of their secret meetings. I had 30 minutes. I grabbed a spare blue technician's polo shirt I'd borrowed from a maintenance closet and an old, deactivated tech keycard I'd found. I looked the part. I took the service elevator to the 12th floor, to the network closet. They wouldn't pull the physical camera. That was too obvious. They would just sever the feed to the server and wipe the drive. But they only knew about the main server. They didn't know about the A17 redundant system. I opened the junction box. The primary feed went to their server. The secondary, backup feed went to mine. They were planning to cut both and wipe the first. I had a better idea. I didn't just protect the feed. I went to the central communications hub on the roof, a place I'd mapped on my second day. I found the bundle for the 12th floor camera. I rerouted the live feed, bypassing their local network entirely, and fed it directly, and only, to the A17 server. I was back at my desk by 9:55 p.m. At 10 o'clock p.m., the IT team, working on Devon's orders, cut the line. They disconnected a decoy loop. They wiped a server that was no longer receiving the signal. But my server, the company's true memory, was now getting a crystal clear, exclusive, live feed of the 12th floor hallway. I minimized the terminal. On my screen was a spreadsheet of shipping manifests. I tagged a container of paper towels as received. The trap was no longer just baited. It was fully armed. My corporate apartment became the headquarters of a one-woman auditing firm. The work I did in the basement during the day was my cover. The work I did at night, wired into the A17 server from my sterile living room, was the real job. This was the shadow audit. My methodology was cold, meticulous, and absolute. I was no longer a victim. I was an investigator. And this was my journal of the crime. I began by downloading the complete access logs for the 40th and 12th floors, not just from the main network, but from the physical security turnstiles and keycard readers. The redundant server time-stamped every single data packet with its own internal atomic clock and, more importantly, a thermal signature log from the server's processors. It was an immutable record of when a file was accessed, by whom, and even the processing power required. It was a digital fingerprint that couldn't be faked. This proved my audit was clean, and more importantly, would prove when they had accessed and altered files. The money trail, which had begun at Harbor Social LLC, was my primary target. It was a tangled, deliberately convoluted mess. Marla hadn't just moved the money, she had washed it. The transfer ledgers on the backup server, which she believed were just duplicates of the clean books, showed the complete, unedited story, funds from my trust, along with siphoned money from at least 3 other dormant family accounts, were funneled into Harbor Social. From there, the money didn't sit. It was immediately dispersed in a series of structured payments to Raven Oaks Catering. Devon's Shell Company. I pulled its incorporation papers. It was a classic pass-through. Raven Oaks would then bill Vail Harbor's operations budget, Devon's own department, for services rendered. These were the community outreach events. The invoices were massively inflated, charging $10,000 for audio-visual equipment rental for a party that used a Bluetooth speaker, or $50,000 for staffing a gala held at Marla's home. The money, now clean revenue, was then paid out as a management fee to a secondary holding company, which, after 3 more hops, landed in a private wealth account in the Cayman Islands, an account held in trust by Devon Vail. Next, I moved to Marla's calendar, on the live company server. Her schedule was a wall of professional engagements, charity lunches, and board pre-briefs, but the A17 server kept a log of every change. I wrote a simple script to compare the current calendar with its history. The results were damning. Over the past month alone, I found 12 instances where a meeting's subject line had been altered. A 2:00 p.m. meeting on Tuesday, originally titled A17 Trust Fund Actuarial Review, was created by her assistant. Then, less than 60 seconds later, was manually retitled by Marla herself to Rook, a meeting with the corporate counsel. Originally Golden Proxy Clause Inquiry was changed to Bishop. She wasn't just hiding her actions. She was actively covering her tracks in real time, never knowing the server was meticulously recording her every keystroke. Then, I found the weapon. It was buried deep in a temporary directory, a staging folder for the 40th floor's oldest networked fax machine, marked for deletion, but never purged by the automated cleanup. It was a single PDF file. The file name was just a string of numbers. I opened it. It was a scanned copy of a fax, dated 3 years prior, a formal directive, supposedly from my grandfather to the trust's administrators, authorizing the full reallocation of the Nora Vail Educational Trust funds to be managed at the discretion of the acting COO. Marla. It was the legal document she had used to seize my money, and at the bottom was his signature, Arthur Vail. My heart, usually so steady during this work, kicked once, hard. It looked perfect. But I'd been staring at his signature on corporate filings for weeks. Something was wrong. It was too perfect. I pulled the file into an analysis program. Then I pulled 10 authenticated, notarized documents from the archive that I knew he had signed in the last 5 years. I overlaid the signatures. The one on the fax was a perfect pixel-for-pixel match for a signature on page 80 of the Vail Harbor Annual Report from the previous year. It wasn't a forgery in the sense of a freehand copy. It was a high-resolution digital lift. They had copied the vector graphic of his signature from one document and pasted it onto another, then faxed the fraudulent document to the trust administrators and to themselves to create a paper trail. I had the means. I had the motive. Now I needed to connect it to the scholarship. I went back to the financial ledgers. I searched for transactions on the exact date that the failed scholarship letter had been faked and sent. There, in the brokerage transaction logs, was a series of sell orders. They were liquidating the specific mutual funds and stocks that had been earmarked for my tuition. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a coordinated attack. They needed to ensure I had no money and no options. The forgery gave them access to the money, and the faked email slammed the other door shut. It was time to assemble the case. I couldn't present this as a simple list of files. It needed to be a story, An indictment that a board of directors, however complicit, could not ignore. I opened an offline program and began to build a flowchart. At the center, I put 2 boxes, Marla Vale and Devon Vale. From Marla, an arrow pointed to the forged PDF, to the Harbor Social LLC bank statements, to the audio file from the copy room. Move that last part of Nora's fund, which I'd clipped to a perfect 30-second confession. I pinned screenshots of her edited calendar entries. From Devon, an arrow pointed to Raven Oaks Catering, to the falsified invoices, to the Cayman Islands account number. I found one more piece, a separate, seemingly unrelated internal loan agreement. It was from the company to Devon, for a strategic share buyback to increase executive alignment. It was, in effect, a massive, interest-free loan to himself, approved by Marla. But the transfer logs showed the funds weren't wired to a brokerage account. The entire sum was wired directly to a risk management holding company. A simple search revealed the holding company was the financial arm of a high-stakes casino in Las Vegas. It wasn't a share buyback, it was a corporate bailout for his gambling debts. I added it to the chart. It demonstrated a pattern of systemic, habitual fraud that went far beyond just me. This wasn't a family dispute. This was a criminal enterprise. I gathered every file, the vector analysis of the signature, the complete audio recording, the hallway camera footage of Rinaldi the auditor leaving the Rook meeting, the ledgers, the invoices, the brokerage orders, and the completed flowchart. I put them all into a single folder, compressed it, and encrypted it with 256-bit AES. I named the file Q3 Ops Reconcile. Zip, a digital Trojan horse, disguised as the very intern work they'd assigned me. I paused. My finger over the mouse, as the program asked for a password, I typed in the 8 digits for the date my Pontiac had been hooked by the tow truck, the date I'd been found, the date my grandfather had, in his own cold way, saved me. As the file finished compressing, I uploaded it to a secure, anonymous cloud service, creating a burnable link. The progress bar hit 100%. I sat back in the cheap office chair, the air in the sterile apartment feeling heavy and cold. It was done. All the rage, all the cold nights, all the meticulous, painstaking hours, all distilled into a single 4.7 gigabyte file. As if on cue, the burner phone on the desk vibrated, a harsh, buzzing sound in the silence. I picked it up, a single text message from a blocked number. It was him. Board meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. You sit in the back. The summons came an hour before the board meeting, not as a text on the burner phone, but as a crisp, polite email from Marla's executive assistant. Ms. Vale would like to see you in her office at your earliest convenience. The invitation was a command. I logged out of the invoice reconciliation software. My final entry, a $12.99 charge for office supplies. I took the elevator from the basement's fluorescent gloom up to the 40th floor's silent art gallery ambiance. The air was thinner up here, scented with something expensive and vaguely floral. Marla's office was a corner suite, 2 walls of floor-to-ceiling glass offering a godlike view of Grey Ridge. She didn't look up when I entered. She was signing letters, her hand moving in a quick, dismissive flick. Nora, come in. Close the door. I did. The heavy wood clicked shut, sealing us in. She finally looked up, her face arranged into a mask of warm, benevolent authority. This was her supportive aunt persona, the one she used for photo ops and public announcements. I just want to say, she began, leaning back in her ergonomic throne, that we've all been so impressed with your work ethic. She steepled her manicured fingers. Devon tells me you've been just a beaver. Head down, no complaints, just pure hard work. That's the Vale spirit we've been missing. I said nothing. I just stood there, the perfect, humble intern. We feel your probationary period is coming to a successful close. We are trashing the intern title and officially bringing you on as a junior operations analyst. She smiled, as if bestowing a knighthood. It comes with a slight salary adjustment, of course, We are very, very proud of your efforts. She slid a document across the acres of polished mahogany that separated us. It was thick, at least 20 pages, bound in a sharp blue cover. This is just the standard employment agreement, an NDA, really. Protects the company, protects you, the usual. I picked it up. Confidentiality, non-disclosure, and proprietary rights agreement. I opened to the last page. The slight salary adjustment was an increase of 50 cents an hour. It wasn't a raise. It was an insult. A symbolic pat on the head for the poor relation who knew her place. It was the price she was willing to pay to buy my silence, to legally gag me before I could ever become a problem. I made a show of flipping through the pages, my brow furrowed in concentration. I let the silence stretch. It's a lot to take in, I said, my voice carefully neutral. I want to read it properly. Would it be possible to get a PDF copy? Just so I can review it at home tonight before I sign. Marla's smile tightened. Just a fraction. She wanted the signature now, but to refuse would be suspicious. Of course, dear, she said, her tone dripping with false patience. A thorough employee. I like that. My assistant will email you the file. Just have it signed and on my desk by, say, 10 a.m. tomorrow? Thank you, Marla. I really appreciate the opportunity. We all do, Nora, she said, her eyes already flicking back to her monitor. I was dismissed. Back in my corporate apartment, I opened the file. The metadata told the first part of the story. Created by the legal department's head counsel. Modified this morning by Marla's executive assistant. I ran the file through a forensic scanner. There it was. Not a clause, but a macro. A small, elegant piece of code embedded in the document, set to trigger on print or on accept signature. The macro would automatically insert a new paragraph into the final. Executed copy. Section 14.b. Employee hereby waives any and all rights to financial remuneration or reward related to the reporting of any internal malfeasance, whether reported to the company or to an external governing body, including all state and federal whistleblower provisions. It was a digital dagger. They weren't just asking me to be quiet. They were forcing me to sign away my right to ever report them, and to do it without my knowledge. They were trying to make me an accomplice to my own silencing. My fingers were cold as I worked. I opened a hex editor. I didn't remove the macro. That would be too obvious and would break the file's integrity. Instead, I added to it. I embedded a non-printing, non-visible annotation directly into the PDF's code, layered over the very section the macro would target. The annotation was a single, legally precise sentence. Per State Statute 112.3187, any provision within this agreement intended to waive, preempt, or nullify employee protections under the State Whistleblower Act is hereby rendered void and unenforceable as a matter of public policy. It was invisible. It wouldn't show up on her screen or on the printed copy, but it was now part of the file's permanent data. It was my digital countersignature, my legal shield, time-stamped and embedded before I ever signed. I saved this new, weaponized version of the document. Then, I opened my email. I composed a new message to Marla. Subject: NDA review. A few questions. Hi, Marla. Thank you again for this. I've been reviewing the PDF you sent, and I just have a few minor clarifying questions on the scope of Sections 4 and 9. Would you have 15 minutes to discuss tomorrow before the board meeting? Best, Nora. I typed in her address. Then, in the BCC field, I typed a simple, internal-only routing address. Records at Valais Legal. It was an alias for the General Counsel's automated intake system, an email black hole designed to create a permanent, undeletable, and discoverable record of any and all potential legal inquiries or disputes. The moment I hit send, Marla's NDA, and my concern about it, became a formal, logged item in the legal department's permanent file, available under subpoena. She had just officially notified the company's top lawyer of her own fraudulent contract. A new message pinged on the secure chat client I used to monitor the A17 server. It was from Devon, a Slack message to his assistant. I had flagged his account for alerts. That idiot intern is sniffing around. Make sure the old ops printer, the one we used for the Raven Oaks runs, is shredded by EOD. And I mean shredded, not just wiped. I don't want a single receipt left. Don't worry. I'll handle Nora. She's about to be very appreciative. The old invoice printer, the one with the unique ink bleed pattern, and the specific serial number that I had matched to the fraudulent catering invoices, they were destroying the physical evidence. I grabbed my burner phone and sent a one-word text to Miguel. The night guard. Printer, his reply came 3 minutes later. On it. The afternoon dragged. I pretended to scan manifests, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. At 4:50 p.m., 10 minutes before my shift ended, Miguel walked past my cubicle, pushing a large gray trash receptacle. He didn't slow down, but as he passed, he dropped a wadded-up paper towel onto my desk. "Don't forget your trash, miss," he murmured, and was gone. I waited until the row of cubicles was empty. I unfolded the paper towel. Inside was a heavy black plastic object, an ink cartridge. It was sticky. Dark, viscous printer ink stained my palm. I looked closer. Taped to the side of the cartridge was a small, torn-off piece of the printer's chassis, a metal tag bearing the serial number. It matched the number from my file. Miguel hadn't just saved the ink. He'd saved the machine's DNA. They could shred the body, but I had its heart. I wrapped the paper towel around it and shoved it deep into my bag. I stared at my hand. The ink had seeped into the creases of my palm. A dark, permanent stain. It was the feeling of victory, I realized. But it wasn't warm. It was the cold, greasy, tangible feeling of truth. It was the end of the digital hunt and the beginning of the physical kill. I left the building for the last time as an intern. I walked to my apartment, but I didn't go in. I went to the archive room, to the steel door. I sat at the terminal for 2 hours. I ran a deletion script, wiping my access logs from the main server, erasing every trace of my late-night sessions. I left only the pristine, boring record of Nora Vale, operations intern, who logged in at 9 a.m. and out at 5 p.m. I disconnected my remote access. I logged out of the A17 server. I stood in the cold, humming room and placed my white keycard on the desk, a key for a door that no longer opened for me. I walked out, and the steel door clicked shut behind me, the lock engaging with a final, heavy thud. My trail was cold. I went to the 40th floor executive lounge. I walked into the empty marble-clad restroom. I turned on the hot water and scrubbed the printer ink from my hand. I watched the black-blue stain run down the drain, swirling against the pure white porcelain before disappearing. I checked my reflection in the mirror. The same tired eyes, the same cheap blouse, but my hands were clean, and my bag was heavy. It was 9:55 a.m. The board meeting was starting. I took my seat, as instructed, a single, hard-backed chair against the back wall, by the catering station, where the interns and assistants sat during presentations. I was invisible. The boardroom on the 40th floor was a glass box in the sky. Rain lashed against the windows. A furious, soundless assault. The gray light of the storm glittered on the surface of the vast, polished oak table, making it look like a dark, disturbed body of water. Around it sat the board, 12 men and women, pillars of the community, their faces impassive, their portfolios diversified, their loyalty bought and paid for. Marla stood at the head of the table, a portrait of serene control. She was in the middle of her quarterly report. A massive flat screen behind her displayed a series of aggressively positive graphs. And so, as you can see, our Q3 profits remain stable, tracking just above projections. Despite the market downturn, she said, her voice a smooth, confident melody. Our strategic reallocation of dormant assets has been particularly effective in maximizing liquidity. Dormant assets, that's what I was. Devon, seated at her right hand, lounged in his chair, a picture of smug entitlement. He chuckled. looking around the table. What Marla's too modest to say is that we're navigating a minefield out there. It's not easy. The new generation. He made a vague, dismissive gesture. They need a lot of guidance, a firm hand. We're providing that firm hand, and the numbers show it. Several members nodded, sipping their water. The vote to reapprove their executive compensation package was next on the agenda. It was a foregone conclusion. At the far end of the table, silent and separate, sat my grandfather. He hadn't spoken a word. He looked like the relic they treated him as. He cleared his throat. It was a small, dry sound, but it cut through Marla's presentation like a gunshot. She paused, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Yes, Arthur, do you have a question?" "A comment," he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the pin-drop silence. "Before we vote on the compensation package." He turned his head, his gaze finding me in the shadows by the coffee urns. "I believe my granddaughter, Nora, has a brief operations report. I've granted her 3 minutes." Every head in the room turned. 12 pairs of expensive, surprised eyes locked onto me. I saw Marla's face freeze. Her smile became a brittle, painted-on thing. Devin just looked confused, as if a dog had just spoken. "Arthur," Marla said, her voice dangerously sweet. "This is a closed board meeting. Nora is an intern. Perhaps she's confused about the—" "She is not confused," Arthur said. 3 minutes. I stood up. My bag was heavy on my shoulder. I walked the length of the room. The sound of my sensible, rubber-soled shoes, a vulgar intrusion on the plush, silent carpet. Marla and Devin watched me as one might watch a piece of trash blow across a pristine lawn. I did not look at them. I walked to the head of the table, set my bag down, and pulled out a simple, black USB drive. "If you'll excuse me, Ms. Vale," I said, and unplugged her laptop from the presentation hub. She was too stunned to stop me. I plugged my own drive in. The screen behind me, the one that had just shown their triumphant graphs, flickered to black. Then, a new image appeared. It was grainy, time-stamped, and utterly damning. It was the 12th floor hallway camera. The feed they thought they had erased. It was silent, showing the closed door of the Rook meeting room. "This is an operational matter I uncovered in the operations department," I said, my voice clear and cold. It didn't tremble. I was surprised. I was no longer a person. I was a ledger. "It concerns the misappropriation of corporate assets and potential wire fraud. Please listen." I hit the spacebar. The video was silent, but the audio that played was not from the video. It was from the copy room. It was Marla's voice, a low, venomous whisper that filled the boardroom. "Move that last part of Nora's fund into the general account. It'll be invisible by morning. She'll never know. She's too busy playing with shipping labels in the basement to ever figure it out." There was a collective, sharp intake of breath. One board member, a woman with iron-gray hair, put her hand to her throat. Marla's face had gone a stark, chalky white. Devin half rose from his chair. "What is this? This is illegal." "It was recorded on company property, in accordance with the employee handbook you signed." "Devin," I said, not looking at him. I hit the next key. The flowchart I had built filled the screen. It was brutally simple. A box labeled, "Nora Vale Edu Trust," at the top. A red arrow pointing to Harbor Social LLC, with Marla's name listed as president. A second arrow from that box to Raven Oaks Catering. A final arrow split. One line going to a photo of Marla's spa weekend, another to an account number labeled Cayman Isles Trust, and a third to a wire transfer receipt for a Las Vegas casino. Underneath it all, I put the 2 signatures, side by side, the real one and the identical, vector-lifted forgery. "My education trust was illegally liquidated using a forged signature," I said, using my hand to point at the screen. "The funds were laundered through a shell company, Harbor Social, which Ms. Vale controls. They were then funneled into a second shell company, Raven Oaks Catering, controlled by Mr. Vale, under the guise of community outreach expenses. These expenses included private parties, spa treatments, and as you can see, the payment of Mr. Vale's personal gambling debts. "This is slander, lies," Devon roared, his face purple. "You have no proof. Those invoices are legitimate." "I do have proof," I said. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the wadded-up paper towel. I set it on the polished oak table and unfolded it, revealing the sticky, ink-stained cartridge and the small metal serial number tag. Then I slid a stack of the fraudulent Raven Oaks invoices next to it. "This is the ink cartridge from the operations printer Mr. Vale ordered shredded last night. This is its serial number plate." I took a single invoice and laid it beside the cartridge. "And this is that serial number, printed on the bottom of every fraudulent invoice, created by that specific machine, the machine I was told you destroyed." Silence. Absolute, deafening silence, broken only by the sound of the rain on the glass. The board members stared at the physical evidence, the ink, the numbers, the truth, ugly and tangible, sitting on their immaculate table. Marla said nothing. She was just staring at the ink cartridge, her white-knuckled hands gripping the arms of her chair. A new voice spoke. It was the general counsel, a quiet man named Harrison, who had sat at the end of the table, observing. "Mr. Vale," he said, addressing my grandfather. "Your granddaughter's evidence seems compelling, but the voting power in this room still rests with the acting CEO and COO. My grandfather nodded slowly. "Mr. Harrison, you are a student of the company's bylaws, are you not? You are familiar with Appendix B, the Golden Proxy Mandate." Harrison's eyes widened, just slightly. "Yes, sir, I am." "And you are aware," my grandfather continued, his voice still quiet, "that I underwent a minor, planned cardiac procedure last month, a procedure which required general anesthesia?" Harrison swallowed. "Yes, sir. The board was notified." "And you are aware that general anesthesia constitutes a form of temporary incapacitation as defined by that same bylaw?" Harrison nodded, his face pale. He understood. "Yes, sir, it does. Upon written confirmation from your physician, which we received, the Golden Proxy Clause was activated 30 days ago. It remains active for another 60 days. Marla's head snapped up. "What? That's an archaic. It's a dead clause. It hasn't been used in 50 years. The board does not need to approve it. Marla," Arthur said. "It is automatic. It is the charter." He finally looked at her, his eyes as cold and gray as the storm outside. "And the designated proxy, the sole individual who holds my full, controlling voting shares for this period, is named in Addendum B1. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on her. "My voting shares today, Marla, and all the power they represent, do not belong to me. They belong to the person who proved the truth. They belong to Nora." The air left the room. It was the single most violent act I had ever witnessed. Devon, his face a mask of pure panic, fumbled for his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer. You can't, this is—" "Phone's off," Mr. Harrison snapped, his voice suddenly steel. "All of you, phones on the table. This is now a matter of official corporate record. No outside communication." Devon froze, his hand on his phone. Marla looked as if she had been turned to stone. The other board members looked at me, not with pity or anger, but with a new, sharp, calculating fear. I was no longer the intern. I was, for all intents and purposes, the new king. I stood at the head of the table. I looked at the 12 faces, and then at Marla. I felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just the cold, clean click of a lock falling into place. "I am exercising the full voting power of the chairman," I said, my voice projecting into the vacuum. "I call for an emergency vote, effective immediately. Motion 1. The immediate removal of Marla Vale as Chief Operating Officer for cause. Motion 2. The immediate removal of Devon Vale as Head of Operations for cause. Motion 3. The formation of an independent investigative committee, reporting only to me, with full subpoena power to conduct a complete forensic audit of the company's books, beginning with Harbor Social and Raven Oaks Catering. I looked at the stunned faces. I did not wait for a second. All in favor? I raised my hand. Mr. Harrison, the general counsel, called for a 10-minute recess. The words hung in the air. A temporary ceasefire in a war that had just been won. The board members, looking pale and shaken, pushed their chairs back with a collective scrape of wood on the silent carpet. No one spoke. No one looked at Marla or Devon, who remained frozen in their seats. Suddenly pariahs in the kingdom they had ruled. My grandfather stood up slowly. He didn't look at the chaos. He looked at me. With a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of his head, he gestured toward a discreet wood-paneled door at the side of the room, the private elevator. I followed him. The walk felt 100 miles long. The silence in the room was a physical pressure, the weight of 16 years of lies collapsing in on itself. We stepped into the elevator, a small, intimate box paneled in the same dark, polished oak as the boardroom table. The doors slid shut with a soft, final hiss, sealing us in. The roar of the storm outside was instantly muted to a distant, gentle drumming. We didn't move. The elevator remained stationary on the 40th floor. He stood with his hands resting on the silver head of his cane. I stood with my bag, containing the ink-stained cartridge, still slung over my shoulder. It felt like a useless, heavy burden now. The battle was over. This was something else. He was the first to speak. He didn't turn to face me, but stared at his own faint reflection in the polished wood. His voice was low, stripped of its usual command. It was the voice of an old man. "Do you hate me, Nora?" he asked, "for letting it go on this long?" The question was a blade, sharp and unexpected. I had prepared for legal challenges, for corporate battles, for shouts and accusations. I had not prepared for this. I had not prepared for the quiet, devastating weight of his guilt. I thought of the cold seeping through the floor of my Pontiac. I thought of the taste of stale coffee at 4 a.m. I thought of the shame I felt when the scholarship rejection letter arrived, the bone-deep certainty that I was a failure, that I was not good enough. I thought of the years I had lost, not just of comfort, but of confidence, of the simple, easy belief that I belonged in the world. Hate was too simple a word. It was a fire that had burned out, leaving behind something harder and more permanent. "No," I said, and my own voice surprised me with its steadiness. "I don't hate you." I took a breath. "I'm angry that I had to sleep in my car while the walls of this elevator are lined with handcrafted wood. I'm angry that I learned the value of $1 by counting quarters for tips while they were stealing millions." I finally looked at his reflection. Hate is an emotion. What I feel now is an asset, like this building, and I plan to leverage it. He absorbed that in silence. He didn't flinch. He didn't offer an excuse. He simply nodded, a slow, tired acknowledgement of a debt he couldn't repay. Then, he reached out and pressed a small, almost invisible seam in the wood paneling. A section clicked open, not with a modern, electronic hum, but with the soft, well-oiled sound of old mechanics. It was a hidden compartment, a relic from the company's founding days, a place to hide secrets. From inside, he withdrew a single, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed not with wax, but with age. The paper was thick, the corners slightly softened. It looked important. He turned and handed it to me. My name was typed on the front, with no address. My fingers felt numb as I broke the seal. The paper inside was crisp. It was a letter. From the university. The letterhead was official, the crest embossed. I read the first line. "Dear Ms. Vale, on behalf of the Scholarship Committee, it is with great pleasure that we offer you the Vale Family Legacy Scholarship, covering full tuition and board for the duration of your undergraduate studies." It was the original, not a copy, the real thing, in the corner. A small circular stamp from the U.S. Postal Service, the ink slightly faded, but perfectly legible. It was postmarked 3 years ago. the day it was mailed, the day it was stolen from me. I looked up from the page, the words blurring. This was the ghost of the life I was supposed to have. This piece of paper was the crossroads where my path had been violently diverted. My grandfather finally met my eyes. The analytical void was gone. In its place was a deep, weary sadness. "It was delivered to the house," he said softly. "Marla's assistant signed for it. I was away on business. When I returned, Marla mentioned you had decided to find your own way, that you had turned down the scholarship to prove a point. It seemed plausible, vain, but plausible," he sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "But then the trust was deferred, and I began to watch. I suspected they were intercepting your mail, but I couldn't prove it. My word against hers? They would have said I was a doting old fool, trying to spoil my granddaughter, that I was losing my faculties. The board, they follow strength. Nora, not sentiment. I needed proof. I needed something they couldn't dismiss as family drama. And in that quiet, confined space, the last piece of the puzzle slid into place. It wasn't just a test, it was a strategy. He hadn't left me to struggle out of some cold, philosophical belief in character building. He had left me in the wilderness because he knew. He knew they would underestimate me. He knew they would see me as a problem to be managed, not a threat to be neutralized. My hardship wasn't an unfortunate side effect of his inaction. It was the entire point. He had used my difficult path to illuminate their dirty one. He had sacrificed his queen, knowing she was the only piece on the board they would never see coming. The anger I thought was gone flickered, just for a moment. The coldness of the calculation was breathtaking. He had gambled with my life. But he had won, and so had I. I carefully folded the letter and put it in my jacket pocket. It felt warm against my chest. "I don't need an apology. Grandfather," I said. The title felt strange on my tongue, but it was the right one for this moment. "Apologies are for things that are over. This is just beginning." I looked him in the eye. "I need the signing authority." He gave a small, sad smile. "I thought you might—" He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and produced a slim, leather-bound folder and a heavy, gold-nibbed fountain pen. He opened the folder. It was a single, elegantly printed document, a formal transfer of power. It cited the Golden Proxy Clause and his physician's attestation of temporary incapacitation. It formally ceded all rights, responsibilities, and the full, indivisible voting power of the chairman of the board to Nora Vale, for a period not to exceed 90 days. He didn't sign it on a table. He held it against the wood-paneled wall of the elevator and uncapped the pen. The nib scratched against the heavy paper. The only sound in the small space. He signed his name, Arthur Vale, not with the perfectly rendered digital copy they had stolen, but with the slightly shaky, infinitely more powerful hand of the man himself. He capped the pen with a decisive click and handed the document to me. The ink was still wet. "It's done," he said. At that exact moment, the elevator gave a soft chime. The recess was over. The doors slid open with a whisper. The world outside the elevator seemed brighter. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, and a soft, watery light was filtering into the boardroom. The stunned faces of the board members turned to watch us emerge. My grandfather walked past them and returned to his seat at the end of the table, a king returning to his throne, content to watch the reign of his chosen successor. I walked back to the head of the table. The only sound was the faint tapping of Arthur's pen against the oak, a quiet, rhythmic beat. It sounded, I thought, exactly like my own heart, calm, steady, and in control. I walked back to the head of the table. The 10-minute recess had been a lifetime. The board members were resettling, their faces a mixture of shock, calculation, and a new, sharp-edged respect. I did not sit. I placed the single-page document, the one my grandfather had signed in the elevator, on the polished wood. The ink was dry. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice cutting through the residual tension. "Before the recess, you confirmed the activation of the Golden Proxy. Will you please confirm the legitimacy of this document for the board?" The general counsel rose, took the paper, and read it. His face was a perfect legal mask. He read it once, then a second time, as if to be certain. He looked at my grandfather, who nodded once. "The document is in order," Harrison announced, his voice flat and official. "It is a legal, binding, and immediate transfer of authority, per the corporate charter, Article 4, Appendix B, and the physician's attestation. The full and indivisible voting power of the chairman, Arthur Vale, is legally and temporarily transferred to Ms. Nora Vale for a period of 90 days. A woman on the board, a bank president, let out a small, audible gasp. Marla, who had been whispering furiously to Devon, went rigid. The blood drained from her face again. This was the one calculation she had missed. I did not let the shock settle. "Thank you. Mr. Harrison, the recess is over. We will now proceed with the vote I called for." I looked around the table, not at the board as a group, but at each member, one by one, making and holding eye contact. They were no longer my grandfather's peers. They were, for the next 90 days, my subordinates. "We will vote on the 3 motions in sequence. All debate is closed." My voice was as flat as the lawyer's. Motion 1. The immediate removal of Marla Vale as Chief Operating Officer for cause, pending a full criminal and civil investigation. I raised my hand. It was the only hand I needed. The motion carries. A beat of silence. Then the gray-haired woman who had gasped now raised her hand in affirmation. Then another, and another. Within 5 seconds, it was unanimous, save for Marla herself, who sat as if she had been turned to stone. Motion 2. The immediate removal of Devon Vale as head of operations for cause. I raised my hand. The motion carries. This time, the board's hands went up instantly. Motion 3. The formation of an independent investigative committee with full subpoena power, reporting only to the acting chair, to conduct an immediate and complete forensic audit of the company's books, beginning with Harbor Social LLC and Raven Oaks Catering. I raised my hand. The motion carries. It was over in less than a minute. I had decapitated the company. I had taken the firm, steady hand they'd boasted about, and cut it off at the wrist. Before anyone could speak, before the paralysis could wear off, I pulled out the burner phone. The board members watched, mesmerized. As I opened my secure email client, I had 2 drafts saved. The first was addressed to the public portal of the Securities and Exchange Commission and the White Collar Crimes Division of the U.S. Attorney's Office. The second was addressed to the senior partners at Deloitte, the most ruthless external auditing firm in the country. The subject line for both was identical. Vale Harbor Capital. Urgent. Internal audit findings. Confidential. I pasted the anonymous, time-limited download link to my encrypted file. The file with the password of the day my life changed. Q3 Ops Reconcile. Zip. I hit send on both. "Mr. Harrison," I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. "The relevant authorities and our new external auditors have just received the preliminary evidence package. You and your department will offer them your full and unrestricted cooperation, effective immediately." Harrison just nodded, his face pale. He understood. This was no longer a family squabble to be buried. I had just, in effect, invited the federal government into the boardroom. I turned to the desk phone and dialed the 4-digit extension for the head of communications. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with anxiety. "Jenna," I said. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "This is Nora Vale, acting chair. We are issuing a press release in 20 minutes. I am emailing you the text now." I was already typing on the terminal. The headline is, "Vale Harbor Capital announces leadership restructuring. Cites internal audit. You will state that Marla Vale and Devon Vale have stepped down, effective immediately. You will emphasize a new era of full transparency, and you will make a specific, binding commitment to restoring and protecting the integrity of all educational trusts and scholarships managed by this firm. No further comment. Am I clear?" There was a stunned beat of air silence. Yes, Ms. Vale, absolutely. I hung up. While the board was still processing the speed of the fallout, I pulled a piece of heavy cream-colored letterhead from the desk tray. It was my grandfather's personal stationery. I took his heavy, gold-nibbed pen. I began to write. It was not a request. It was an executive order. To the Board of Trustees, Vale Education Fund, you are hereby directed to conduct an immediate review and restoration of all scholarship applications denied or deferred in the past 5 years where funds were, quote, reallocated. You will immediately reinstate all qualified applicants, with funds to be disbursed from the corporate general fund until all misappropriated capital is recovered. The first check you will cut will be to the first student on that list. Her name is Nora Vale. I signed it. Nora Vale, acting chair. I slid the paper across the polished wood to Harrison. Have this on the bursar's desk in 1 hour, and have the funds wired before they close. This, I thought, was the real signature. This was the one that closed the loop. The spell broke. The silence shattered. Marla pushed her chair back. The sound of violent scrape across the floor. She stood up. Her face was no longer white. It was a blotchy, furious red, a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. She was shaking, but her voice was a low, controlled hiss that was more terrifying than any scream. You little thing, she spat. Her eyes locked on me. You grew up on our scraps, and this is how you repay us? You think you've won? She took a step toward me. You will regret this. You have no idea what you've just done. You've destroyed this family. I looked up from my paperwork, my gaze flat. The terror she used to inspire in me, the sense of inadequacy, the fear. It was just gone. It was a cold, empty space. I felt nothing at all. Noted, I said. The word, quiet and dismissive, struck her harder than any insult. It was not a retort. It was an acknowledgement, a closing of a file. Devon, by contrast, was imploding. I'm not. You can't. I'm calling my lawyer. My lawyer, he shouted, his voice cracking. I'll sue this entire board. I'll sue you. This is slander. You can't just... He was fumbling for his phone, stabbing at the screen with a trembling finger. It's not working. My phone is dead. I looked at Harrison. Harrison looked at the head of security, a large, impassive man who had been standing silently by the door for the entire meeting. The guard stepped forward, his hand resting on his radio. Apologies, Mr. Vale, the guard said, his voice polite but firm. Your network access and building privileges were revoked by the acting chair 2 minutes ago. Your corporate accounts are frozen. Devon stared at his dead phone, then at the guard, then at me. The realization that he was, in this moment, utterly powerless, that he was no longer a Vale but just a man in a room he was no longer allowed to be in, hit him like a physical blow. He slumped back into his chair, the bluster gone, leaving only a pale, frightened, middle-aged man. Mr. Harrison, I said, please have security escort Ms. Vale and Mr. Vale from the premises. They are to have access to their personal effects and nothing else. Ms. Vale, Mr. Vale, if you'll follow me, the guard said. They were escorted out, not in handcuffs, not yet, but they were escorted out like trespassers. The heavy door clicked shut behind them. The other board members, as if released from a trance, began to gather their things, a quiet, rustling sound of leather and paper. They filed out, one by one, avoiding my eyes, murmuring Ms. Vale as they passed. They would go back to their own offices and call their own lawyers, calculating how to distance themselves from the blast radius. Soon, the room was empty, save for me and my grandfather. The silence that settled was different. It was clean. Outside, the furious, lashing storm had broken. The rain was still falling, but it was softer now, a steady, cleansing sheet of water washing the city. The sky was a brighter, lighter shade of gray. I sat down. I sat in the chair Marla had just vacated, the one at the head of the table. It was still warm from her. I began to methodically gather my papers, the signed transfer of power, the copy of my executive order, the ink cartridge still wrapped in its paper towel. My grandfather, at the far end of the table, hadn't moved. He was leaning back in his chair, his hands resting on his cane, his shoulders, which I had only ever seen held in a state of rigid, aristocratic tension, were finally, visibly, relaxed. He looked at me, across the long, polished expanse of the table, a table I now commanded. A small, genuine smile touched the corners of his mouth. He said one word, so quiet I could barely hear it, but it landed with the weight of a final, binding verdict. Good. I nodded once, acknowledging him. I closed the leather folder that held the document granting me his power. I rested my hands on it. The leather was cool to the touch, but the cheap, ergonomic chair beneath me, the one that had held all her fear and rage only moments before, now felt warm. It was the unmistakable, unfamiliar warmth of total control. I didn't take the private elevator down. I took the main one, the glass-walled car that descended through the heart of the building, a silent observer of the company I now controlled. I walked across the vast marble lobby, my cheap shoes making no sound. The security guard at the main desk, a man who had never once met my eye, now nodded respectfully. "Ms. Vale," I ignored him. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the clean, rain-washed air of the city. The storm had passed. The sky was a pale, washed-out tin, and the wet pavement reflected the bruised clouds. My Pontiac was waiting where I'd left it, a relic of a forgotten war parked in the executive drop-off lane. It looked small and tired and profoundly out of place. It looked like me. The valet, the same one who had taken my grandfather's keys, rushed forward, his face a mask of anxious confusion. "Ma'am, I can have a car brought around for you. Mr. Vale's driver is on standby." "This one is fine," I said, holding my hand out. He looked down at my outstretched palm, then at the keys to my Pontiac, which he held as if they were a strange, dead insect. He placed them in my hand. I got in. The seat was cold. The air inside smelled of old upholstery and exhaustion. It smelled like my real life. Tucked under the sun visor was a crisp, new vehicle registration and proof of insurance, printed this morning. My grandfather's work, a clean title. I started the engine. It turned over on the first try. A smooth, unfamiliar sound, the tune-up. I pulled out of the executive lane, leaving the glass tower behind me. I didn't drive toward the corporate apartment. I drove toward campus, toward the library. My burner phone, resting on the passenger seat, buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. There were no words, just a PDF attachment. I opened it at a red light. It was a 1-year lease agreement for a small studio apartment. The address was on the top floor of the building that housed the campus library. The tenant was listed as Nora Vale. The final page was a receipt, paid in full. The payment had been made 30 minutes ago. The source of the funds, the Vale Education Fund. He hadn't just given me power, he had given me back my life, using the very instrument they had tried to destroy it with. I pulled over and parked by the curb a block from the campus gates. I got out of the car. I needed to stand on solid ground. I opened the trunk. My meager possessions were still there in their plastic crate, but sitting on top of them was a second envelope, identical to the one my grandfather had given me in the elevator. It was heavy. Inside was not a letter. It was a single, heavy key. Attached to it was a polished brass tag, engraved with my name, Nora Vale, and a room number, 40G, Suite G, on the 40th floor. Not a grand corner office like Marla's, a small, private study. According to the building directory I had memorized, a room with a lock, inside the fortress, my own space. It was not a gift of luxury, it was a foothold. I closed the trunk. I stood on the wet sidewalk, the cool, damp air on my face. From here, I could just see the top of the Northbridge building, its dark glass reflecting the pale, metallic sky. It no longer looked like a monument to their power. It looked like a tool, a weapon, mine. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was an email. The official university crest was at the top. Subject: Vale, Family Legacy Scholarship. Dear Ms. Vale, we are writing to inform you of a significant clerical error discovered during an internal audit. Your original acceptance for the Vale Family Legacy Scholarship was incorrectly processed 3 years ago. We are pleased to inform you that your scholarship has been retroactively and fully reinstated. We offer our most sincere and profound apologies for this egregious oversight and any hardship it may have caused. Hardship, such a small, neat word for the life I had lived. I closed the email. It was a receipt, proof of payment for a debt I could never truly collect. I opened a new email. I addressed it to the group distribution list for the entire Vale family, all the aunts, uncles, and cousins who had watched from the sidelines, who had whispered at holiday dinners, who had seen my struggle and chosen to look away. The subject line was blank. The message was one sentence: I will not be attending the family gathering this weekend. I have to study. I hit send. Then I blocked every one of their numbers. My eyes fell to the passenger seat. Lying there was the thick, blue-bound NDA Marla had given me, the one with my invisible, digital countersignature embedded in its code. It was a contract for my silence, a weapon she had tried to use against me. Now it was just paper, a scabbard with no blade, a useless relic of a war that was already over. I reached into my pocket and felt the cool, solid weight of the new key, the one for Suite 40G. I put it in the same pocket as the folded, original scholarship letter, the proof and the prize, side by side. I got back into the Pontiac. I put the car in drive. I did not look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me worth seeing. There would be no grand speech. There would be no tearful reconciliations, no dramatic scenes of forgiveness. Pity was a currency I no longer traded in. Justice was not an emotion. It was a transaction, and the books were now balanced. My rage had been an investment, and today it had finally paid out. From now on, the key doesn't open someone else's cabinet. It opens my door. Thank you so much for listening to the story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below, and let's connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like, and to help this story reach more listeners. You can give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button. Your support means the world.